The Yantar aimed lasers at our pilots. That move by Russia was not just reckless, it was extremely dangerous. On November 19, 2025, off the coast of Scotland, a British pilot was flying a $200 million aircraft over the dark waters of the North Sea. Then, without warning, flash. The cockpit was filled with an intense neon green light. For a moment, the pilot's vision was overwhelmed. Disorientation set in. A few seconds of confusion in the air can be enough to put an entire crew in serious danger. Far below, on the deck of the Russian vessel Yantar, someone may have thought that the laser had given them an advantage. But that assumption was a major mistake. Instead of pushing anyone away, that beam acted like a signal flare. It drew attention to the ship, exposed its position, and triggered a coordinated US Navy response that Moscow did not appear to expect. Now look at the map. The Yantar was operating here, inside the United Kingdom's exclusive economic zone, just 5 miles off the coast of Scotland. This area is not just open water. It is one of the most sensitive underwater corridors in the world. Beneath the surface run major undersea communication lines, including systems such as Cantat-Tri and Atlantic Crossing Odin. These cables carry a massive share of global digital traffic. Financial transactions, business emails, cloud services, and even videos like the one you are watching right now all depend on fiber optic lines resting quietly on the seabed. If those cables are disrupted, the impact would be immediate. Online payments could fail, cloud platforms could slow down or go offline, major financial markets could face serious interruptions. This is not an ordinary stretch of ocean. It is one of the hidden control panels of the Western economy. And that is why the presence of the Yantar matters so much. Officially, Project 2010 vessels, like Yantar, are described by Moscow as oceanographic research ships. That sounds calm, scientific, even harmless. But in NATO's view, that description leaves out the most important part. Western officials have long considered Yantar to be an intelligence-gathering vessel designed for work around undersea infrastructure. The ship is linked to GUJI, Russia's main directorate of deep-sea research. This organization specializes in deep-water operations, intelligence collection, and preparations for underwater missions during a major conflict. Yantar is equipped with advanced sonar, seismic systems, and most importantly, deep-diving submersibles. 2 of them are known as AS-30 Sem Rus and AS-30 Devich Konsul. These craft can descend to depths of around 6,000 meters. Their robotic arms are not there for sightseeing or collecting sea samples. They can interact directly with objects on the ocean floor, including critical cables and pipelines. Legally, Yantar may have had the right to be in the area, but that night, British officials had strong reasons to believe its presence was anything but routine. This was not guesswork. It was based on the ship's long and troubling record. Yantar has been observed near sensitive underwater infrastructure before. It was reportedly seen close to the Nord Stream pipeline area before the major 2022 incident. During 2023 and 2024, it was also tracked near submarine cables across the Atlantic, and this was already the 2nd time in the same year that Yantar had appeared in waters near the United Kingdom. The concern is clear. This may be part of a broader Kremlin effort to identify, map, and study the key submarine cables and pipelines that connect Britain to the rest of the world. The goal would be simple: to know exactly where the most vulnerable points are should Russia ever decide to create pressure during a future crisis. And Yantar's behavior that night only made the situation more suspicious. Since early November, the ship had reportedly switched off its automatic identification system, known as AIS, while continuing to use maritime radar for awareness and monitoring. For anyone unfamiliar with it, AIS works like a digital license plate at sea. Civilian vessels use it so other ships can see who they are, and where they are heading. It helps prevent collisions and keeps maritime traffic transparent. When a commercial ship turns AIS off, it raises serious legal and safety concerns. When a military-linked vessel does it near critical infrastructure, the message is very different. It is almost like saying, we do not want to be seen, and we do not want anyone asking too many questions. But the most suspicious detail was this. While Yantar's AIS was switched off, the ship was still moving in a slow zigzag pattern at just 3 to 5 knots. In naval terms, that kind of movement usually points to one thing: scanning the seabed. But turning off AIS only works against ordinary merchant vessels. Against the Royal Air Force's P-8A Poseidon, that trick is almost useless. The P-8A is built for exactly this kind of mission. Its AN/APY-10 radar can detect metal structures and surface patterns even in darkness. At the same time, the aircraft systems compare what the radar sees with what AIS is reporting. And in this case, the radar saw the ship. AIS said nothing. Imagine seeing a black truck slowly circling a wealthy neighborhood at 2 a.m. with its headlights off and its license plate covered. You do not need to be a detective to understand that something is wrong. The threat was identified almost immediately. The P-8A activated its alert systems and descended to gather confirmation. Using electronic support measures, synthetic aperture radar, and infrared sensors, the crew scanned the surface of the sea with extreme precision. Even in complete darkness, they detected unusual movement in the water, along with thermal signatures consistent with underwater activity near the surface. It lasted only a few seconds, but that was enough. The aircraft had confirmation that something unusual was happening around Yantar. And when the Russian crew realized they had been spotted, their reaction told its own story. They activated an optical dazzling system and directed it toward the aircraft's cockpit. The goal was clear: disrupt the cameras, overwhelm the pilot's vision, and force the aircraft to move away long enough to create a gap in surveillance. Pointing a laser at an aircraft is not a harmless gesture. It is a gray zone pressure tactic, aggressive enough to send a message, but calculated to stay below the threshold of open conflict. But Russia had just made a serious miscalculation. The moment that beam was activated, it triggered a rapid NATO electronic response that had already been waiting in the background. Inside the British P-8A, the pilot's vision was hit by the intense light. Instinctively, he pulled back on the controls and climbed away from the beam's range. On the deck of Yantar, someone may have thought they had won. They may have believed the aircraft had been forced to leave. But that was not what happened. The British pilot was not running away. He was following NATO procedure with absolute discipline. Create distance, protect the crew, but never lose the target. Just before pulling away, the P-8A released a series of sonobuoys and uploaded the target's exact coordinates into the Link 16 network. Think of Link 16 as a giant military group chat, but instead of messages, it shares real-time tactical data, positions, movements, and alerts. With Allied forces in the area, human eyes can be disrupted. Machine ears cannot. Before leaving the immediate area, the British P-8A marked the location and passed the information to every Allied unit connected to the network. And who received that message? The US Navy. Now you might be wondering, why was the US Navy already there at that exact moment? What many people do not realize is that the United States was not suddenly arriving in the area. It had already been there. In today's tense geopolitical climate, the North Sea is part of the Guyuk Gap, the strategic passage between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. For Russia's Northern Fleet, this is the main route out toward the Atlantic Ocean. Since 2022, NATO has followed a policy of persistent presence in this region, keeping a steady and credible military posture around one of the most important maritime corridors on the planet. Think of it like a police car parked quietly at the end of a dark street. When something happens, it does not need to be called. It simply turns on the lights. Deep below the surface, a U.S. Navy Virginia-class submarine, USS Indiana, was already waiting. Silent, patient, listening. It moved into the baffles, the acoustic blind spot behind Yantar, and began collecting detailed sound signatures from the AS Tritsitsem submersible as it started its underwater movement. Did Russia think its mini-sub could disappear beneath the waves? To a trained sonar technician aboard a Virginia-class submarine, the sound of those engines would not be invisible at all. It would stand out clearly against the background noise of the sea. The USS Indiana stayed completely quiet, using its bow sonar to track the Russian submersible's path. But Russia's biggest mistake was not underwater. It was in the sky. To aim the laser accurately toward the British aircraft's cockpit, Yantar had to activate its navigation sensors and high-powered tracking systems. And the moment those systems came online, they created a massive electronic signature. They broke the silence of the electromagnetic spectrum. At around 35 feet, another U.S. Navy P-8A was flying quietly under MCON, emissions control. It was not broadcasting, it was listening, and it heard everything. This P-8A was not there just to take pictures. It was operating on a signals intelligence mission, focused on capturing and analyzing electronic activity in the area. Its AN/ALQ Dafis Dvaadinodin tri-system did not respond immediately. Instead, it recorded frequency, pulse rate, bandwidth, emission pattern. Every detail of the Russian system's electronic fingerprint was captured in real time. The Link 16 data gave NATO the location. The electronic support data gave NATO the profile. In other words, the Russians thought they had bought themselves a few minutes of darkness to move their submersible. In reality, they had just revealed the information needed to track, classify, and counter them. Now the AS Tritsitsem was in the water. On board Yantar, the captain was likely waiting in silence, believing the sky above him had been cleared. But this is where the US Navy began applying pressure. The American P-8A, still hidden in the darkness, sent out a narrow-band radar pulse toward the area. It did not engage. It did not escalate. It simply touched Yantar's antenna for a moment and disappeared. In military terms, this was the knock, not a strike, not a warning shot. Just a cold, precise message. We know where you are. The Russian captain was not inexperienced. He understood immediately that Yantar had been exposed, so he reached for a classic deception tactic, split the target. Yantar shut down its radar, trying to disappear from the electronic picture. At the same time, the AS Tritsitsim below the surface released an acoustic decoy. The decoy was designed to imitate engine noise and drift west, while the real submersible quietly moved east and descended deeper into the water. It was like someone tossing a stone into the bushes to distract a guard dog. Russia hoped the American submarine would follow the false signal, but they forgot who was listening. Deep below the surface, USS Indiana did not react to the trick. Sonar specialists aboard Virginia-class submarines are trained to hear details that most people could never imagine. To them, the difference between a false sound and a real underwater vehicle is not a guess. It is a signature. They ignored the decoy. But instead of moving directly toward the real target, Indiana carried out a reverse track maneuver. Think of a soccer player pretending to run left, forcing the defender to look the wrong way, then suddenly cutting back and slipping behind him. That is exactly what Indiana did. As Russian sonar searched forward, the American submarine quietly moved into the disturbed water behind Yantar, positioning itself roughly 900 yards off the ship's stern. From the Russian side, the picture looked clear. But in reality, they were being watched from the one direction they were least prepared for. And then NATO's response unfolded in 3 layers. First came communication disruption. The AS Tritsitsim depended on underwater acoustic signals from its mothership to stay oriented and receive guidance. But the U.S. aircraft began applying electronic pressure against the communication link. Instead of clear instructions, the channel filled with interference. Imagine someone trying to whisper directions through a wall, while another person turns up heavy static right beside them. On Yantar's screens, the result was immediate. The submersible's telemetry dropped out. Data was replaced by warnings and error messages. The AS Tritsitsim was now isolated in the dark water, unable to clearly confirm its position relative to the target area or its mothership. The mission had been effectively stopped, and while the Russian crew tried to understand what had happened to the signal, the U.S. delivered the final psychological message. From its position near Yantar's stern, USS Indiana briefly revealed that it was there, one active sonar pulse. Ping! A sharp, unmistakable sound moved through the water and reflected against the Russian vessel's hull. For the crew on Yantar, the meaning was impossible to miss. The American submarine was not somewhere far away. It was close, very close. At the same time, the British P-8A recovered and circled back. Its radar came online and its searchlights swept across the Russian ship from above. The message to Moscow was clear. Your submersible is isolated. Your ship is being watched, and this operation is over. The message was unmistakable. You are covered from above. You are being tracked from below. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. At that moment, the Russian captain understood that the operation had failed. No live engagement took place, no visible escalation was needed. But strategically, Yantar had already been outplayed by NATO's ability to connect every sensor, every aircraft, every submarine, and every data stream into one shared picture. The order was given: recover the submersible immediately. Yantar turned north and began leaving the area, no longer acting like a ship in control of the situation, but like a vessel that knew it had been watched, exposed, and contained. The final scene of that night said everything. On the P-8 sensor screens, the crew could see Yantar bringing the AS Tritsitsim back onto the deck in a hurry. The lights were no longer pointed at the aircraft. The aggressive posture was gone. The ship was heading away from the United Kingdom's exclusive economic zone. Above it, British and American P-8 aircraft remained in the sky, maintaining watch as the unwanted visitor moved out of the area. Not a single round was fired. But make no mistake, this was a major strategic setback for Moscow, and the lesson was clear. This was the failure of an old mindset against a modern one. Russia tried to rely on pressure, intimidation, and visual disruption. The idea was simple: overwhelm the pilot, create confusion, and buy time. But the United States and its allies responded with something far more powerful: multi-domain integration. They did not need to rely on one set of eyes. They had radar, they had sonar, they had infrared sensors, they had electronic intelligence, they had real-time data links connecting aircraft, ships, and submarines into a single operational network. You can disrupt one pilot's vision, but you cannot hide from an entire sensor grid. While Russia tried to create confusion, NATO turned the ocean into a monitored, digital battle space. Every movement was tracked, every signal was recorded, every attempt to disappear only created more information. And that is the reality of modern military power. The side that controls the information controls the situation. This interception was not just about protecting one undersea cable, it was a reminder that the hidden arteries of the Western economy are not unguarded. The cables beneath the ocean may be silent, but the forces watching over them are not. They are patient, they are quiet, and they are always listening. So here is the question. After an operation like this, do you think Russia will risk returning to these waters again? And if next time it sends a more capable submarine instead of a research vessel, should the United States respond with another warning signal, or with a stronger show of force? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more military analysis like this, do not forget to like, subscribe, and stay with Navy Vector. See you in the next video. Within 12 hours of the operation, the Pentagon and JIATF South released high-resolution synthetic aperture radar imagery, along with clear, unedited EO/IR footage showing the submersible's final moments. They also released images of the recovered illegal cargo and communication equipment, leaving little room for claims that this had been an innocent fishing vessel. The evidence exposed the political narrative for what it was. President Petro's attempt to turn the U.S. Navy into a political pressure point had failed quickly, publicly, and at sea. His decision to step back from cooperation did not stop the mission. Instead, it led to the immediate removal of a high-value criminal asset, proving to his own security forces and to regional rivals that the U.S. Navy would not be easily delayed or redirected. The Navy had chosen a path of self-reliance, and the result was impossible to hide behind political language. The real lesson from this confrontation was clear. U.S. technological independence can outweigh political pressure. President Gustavo Petro had tried to use a decades-old bilateral security agreement as leverage. His strategy was based on the belief that by slowing or suspending the flow of human intelligence, he could limit the Navy's interdiction mission and gain a temporary political advantage at home. But that calculation was wrong. The U.S. Navy showed that its integrated targeting network, supported by sovereign assets such as the P-8A Poseidon and the MQ-9B Guardian, does not fully depend on foreign human intelligence. It can detect, it can track, it can confirm, and it can act without waiting for a politically sensitive intelligence channel to reopen. The smuggling network's biggest mistake was assuming there was a gap to exploit. They rushed into what they believed was an intelligence vacuum, but instead they ran directly into a system that was faster, more precise, and free from diplomatic hesitation. The U.S. Navy's response was controlled, precise, and decisive, removing a threat valued at hundreds of millions of dollars from more than 15 miles away. The message to Bogota and to every organized criminal network in the region was unmistakable. You may challenge the politics, but you cannot outrun the technology. The United States will not step away from protecting the global commons. It will simply adapt, improve, and build systems that make politically motivated obstruction far less effective. The cost of challenging that reality is not symbolic. It is immediate, it is precise, and it is final. The political rhetoric may fade with time, but the quiet capability of the Aegis network and long-range precision systems remains in place, a constant silent presence across the Caribbean.